Sarah had always dreamed of becoming a mother. She wasn't like everyone else in her small, quiet town. While most women around her were married with children, Sarah was single, but that never stopped her from wanting a family of her own. After years of hoping and waiting, her dream finally came true when she adopted a baby boy. His name was Eli, and he was perfect in her eyes. He had the brightest smile, big, curious eyes, and a soft, gentle laugh that could melt anyone's heart. But there was something about Eli that made him stand out. He was black, and Sarah's town was not used to seeing a family like theirs. When Sarah brought Eli home for the first time, the town couldn't stop talking. People stared at her with wide eyes when she walked by, whispering behind her back, "Why would she adopt a black child?" They would ask each other, "She's single. How will she raise him on her own?" Others were more cruel, believing Sarah had made a mistake, thinking she would regret her decision. Some even said Eli would never fit in or that Sarah wouldn't be able to understand him. But none of that mattered to Sarah. To her, Eli was her son, and she was determined to give him all the love in the world. The first few weeks were blissful for Sarah. She and Eli bonded quickly. She sang him lullabies at night, rocked him to sleep, and felt like the happiest person in the world. But outside their home, things weren't as peaceful. The cold stares and gossip in the town slowly began to creep into Sarah's life. It started when she took Eli for a stroll around the park. She noticed people glancing at them, then quickly looking away, as if they didn't want to be caught staring. Some people even crossed the street to avoid walking near them. At the grocery store, strangers would offer fake smiles and then whisper to each other as soon as she passed. Sarah tried to ignore it, but deep down, the judgment hurt. As Eli grew older, the town's coldness only seemed to grow. When Sarah took him to the playground, the other mothers didn't invite her into their conversations. Eli would toddle over to the other children, but some of the kids, noticing that he was different, would ignore him or ask, "Why doesn't he look like you?" Sarah would gently explain, but the questions, though innocent, chipped away at her heart. Despite it all, Sarah's love for Eli only grew stronger. She was determined to raise him with kindness, courage, and strength, no matter what the town said. Yet she couldn't help but worry. What would Eli's life be like growing up here? Would he ever feel accepted? In the quiet moments after she tucked Eli into bed, Sarah would sit by his crib and wonder if she had made the right decision. The town's whispers were getting louder, making her doubt herself. But then Eli would smile at her, his tiny fingers reaching out, and all the doubts would melt away. Sarah knew deep down that love was more powerful than hate, and she vowed to protect Eli from the harshness of the world outside their door. Still, the shadows of doubt lingered. How much could one heart take when surrounded by so much coldness? Sarah didn't have the answers yet, but she knew one thing for sure. Eli was her son, and no one could take that away. As Eli grew older, the differences between him and the other kids became more noticeable, not just to him, but to everyone around him. By the time Eli started school, he was already aware that he didn't quite fit in. His skin was darker than the other children's, and while he didn't fully understand why that mattered, the other kids seemed to notice it right away. At first, it was just small things. The other kids would ask Eli, "Why are you so different?" Or, "Why don't you look like your mom?" He didn't have an answer to their questions, so he would shrug and walk away. But over time, the teasing grew worse. The kids at school started calling him names, and they would laugh at him when he tried to join in their games. Eli began to feel more and more out of place. His classmates saw him as different, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong. At home, Sarah noticed the change in Eli. He wasn't as cheerful as he used to be, and his once bright smile began to fade. He stopped talking as much, spending more time alone in his room. Sarah's heart ached for her son. She could see the pain he was carrying, and she tried her best to comfort him. "Eli," she would say softly, holding him close, "you are special, and I love you just the way you are." But as much as Sarah tried to reassure him, The hurtful words from school stayed with Eli. As the years passed, the town didn't grow any kinder. The people who had once whispered behind Sarah's back about her decision to adopt Eli were now openly critical. Some even told Sarah directly that she had made a mistake. "He'll never fit in here," they would say. "He's too different." Sarah tried to block out their harsh words, but they hurt. She worried that their negativity was sinking into Eli's heart too. Eli overheard these comments more often than he would admit. He heard people at the grocery store muttering under their breath, teachers giving him pitying looks, and even neighbors questioning Sarah's decision. Each cruel remark weighed heavily on him, and he began to internalize the town's negativity. The more he heard, the more Eli believed that maybe they were right. Maybe he didn't belong here. Maybe he would never fit in. The teasing at school didn't stop either. In fact, it only got worse as Eli grew older. Some days, the other kids would call him names that made his stomach churn. Other days, they would exclude him from their games, leaving him to sit on the sidelines, watching them play as if he didn't exist. Eli started to dread going to school, feeling the weight of being an outsider every single day. Sarah noticed how deeply the bullying was affecting Eli, and it tore her apart. She tried to remind him how much he was loved, telling him stories of how she chose him because of how special he was. But Eli didn't always believe her anymore. The world around him felt too cold, too unwelcoming. No matter how much love Sarah gave him, it wasn't enough to erase the hurt from the people around them. The pain of isolation grew heavier on Eli's shoulders. He started to feel like he was living in the shadows, like he was different in a way that couldn't be changed. The townspeople's coldness had seeped into his heart, and Eli couldn't shake the feeling that he would never truly belong. Still, Sarah never gave up on him. Every night, she would sit by his bed, running her fingers through his hair, whispering that things would get better. But even as she tried to believe her own words, she worried. How much more could Eli take before he broke under the weight of feeling like an outsider? One crisp, sunny day, Eli's school organized a field trip to a nearby airfield. It was a place where small planes took off and landed, carrying passengers to nearby towns or offering scenic tours of the area. For most of the kids, it was just an ordinary outing, but for Eli, the moment he stepped onto the tarmac, something inside him lit up. He gazed up at the planes soaring high above, their wings cutting through the blue sky with ease, and he was captivated. As the other kids chatted and giggled amongst themselves, Eli stood rooted to the spot, his eyes glued to the sky. He watched as a sleek silver plane took off, its powerful engines roaring as it climbed higher and higher. The plane looked so free, gliding effortlessly through the air, and Eli's heart raced with excitement. In that moment, a new dream took hold of him. He wanted to fly. He wanted to be up there, among the clouds, soaring like the planes he had just seen. When Eli got home that day, he rushed to tell Sarah. "Mom," he exclaimed, his face glowing with excitement. "I know what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be a pilot." Sarah smiled at his enthusiasm, her heart swelling with pride. "A pilot?" she asked, kneeling down to look him in the eyes. "That's a wonderful dream, Eli." He nodded eagerly, his eyes shining. "I saw the planes today at the airfield. They were amazing. I want to fly like that, Mom. I want to fly through the sky." Sarah could see how much this new dream meant to him. "If that's what you want to do, Eli, I believe you can do it," she said softly, pulling him into a hug. But even as she said the words, a small knot of worry formed in her stomach. She knew that chasing such a dream would be hard for anyone, let alone a boy like Eli, in a town like theirs. Word of Eli's dream quickly spread through the town, and as expected, it was met with harsh judgment. When Sarah mentioned Eli's ambition to a few neighbors, they laughed. "A black boy from here. A pilot." One of them scoffed. He'd be lucky to get a job pumping gas, let alone flying a plane. The more people heard about Eli's dream, the more they ridiculed it. A pilot. That's too big a dream for someone like him, They would say behind Sarah's back, "He'll never make it." Their words were cruel and dismissive, and Sarah worried about how they might affect Eli if he heard them. But Eli, unlike before, didn't let their negativity crush him this time. Every day after school, Eli would spend hours reading books about airplanes, drawing pictures of them, and imagining himself in the cockpit, soaring through the sky. His determination only grew stronger, fueled by the desire to prove everyone wrong. He wanted to show the town that he could dream big and that he could achieve anything he set his heart on, no matter what they thought of him. Sarah supported Eli as best as she could, but deep down, she feared the road ahead for him would be a hard one. "There will be obstacles," she warned him gently one evening. "People will doubt you because they don't understand your dream. But don't let that stop you." Things seemed to be getting better for Eli. With Mr. Lewis's help, he had finally started flying. Every lesson felt like a step closer to achieving his dream. The sensation of being in the cockpit, the roar of the engine, and the feeling of lifting off the ground gave Eli a new sense of purpose. For the first time in a long time, he felt like his dream of becoming a pilot wasn't so far-fetched. But just as hope started to take root, tragedy struck. One cold morning, Sarah received a call that turned their world upside down. Mr. Lewis had passed away suddenly from a heart attack. The news hit Eli like a punch to the stomach. He couldn't believe it. His mentor, the man who had given him his first taste of flying, was gone. The loss was crushing. Not only had Eli lost a friend, but he also lost the one person who believed in him and had the skills to help him reach his goal. Without Mr. Lewis, Eli didn't know how he would continue his flying lessons. His connection to the skies had been severed. The days that followed were filled with heartbreak. Eli would sit in his room, staring at the sky through his window. But this time, the view didn't fill him with excitement. Instead, it reminded him of what he had lost. The dream that had once seemed so close now felt impossible again. How could he keep going without Mr. Lewis's guidance? The weight of grief and disappointment felt like a heavy chain pulling him down, deeper into despair. As if the loss wasn't enough, the townspeople began to talk again. "See, we knew this would happen," they said. "He was never meant to be a pilot. It's time for him to give up this ridiculous dream." Their mocking words stung more than ever, and Eli felt their weight in every step he took. Even at school, the teasing picked up again, with kids laughing at his ambition. They called him names, saying he was foolish for thinking he could fly. The whispers grew louder, and it seemed like everyone expected him to fail. At home, even Sarah began to doubt. She saw how broken Eli was and worried about how much more he could take. The financial burden of continuing flying lessons without Mr. Lewis was daunting, and she feared for Eli's future. Maybe it's time to let go of this dream, she thought to herself, though she never said it out loud. She didn't want to add to her son's pain, but the doubt gnawed at her heart. Eli, too, began to wonder if it was all a mistake. His once fiery determination had dimmed to a flicker, and he questioned whether he should give up. Maybe they're right, he thought bitterly. Maybe I'll never be a pilot. He found himself at rock bottom, unsure of how to climb back up. But in one quiet moment, as he sat alone in his room, Eli remembered something Mr. Lewis had told him during their first flying lesson. The sky belongs to those who dare to reach for it. Those words echoed in his mind, and for the first time in days, something stirred within him. Mr. Lewis hadn't given up on him, so why should he give up on himself? With tears in his eyes and his heart heavy with grief, Eli made a choice. He wasn't going to let this setback define him. He would find a way, no matter how hard it seemed. Mr. Lewis had believed in him for a reason, and Eli wasn't going to let his mentor's faith go to waste. Though the road ahead seemed uncertain, Eli knew one thing for sure. He was going to keep reaching for the sky, no matter how many obstacles stood in his way. Eli refused to give up. After Mr. Lewis's death, the grief was heavy, but his mentor's words echoed in his heart. Every time he felt like quitting, he remembered. The sky belongs to those who dare to reach for it. Those words became his fuel, pushing him forward, even when the odds seemed impossible. With renewed determination, Eli started applying to every aviation program he could find. He spent hours after school researching scholarships, writing letters to flight schools, and filling out application after application. The rejection letters came fast and often. Most programs didn't want to take a chance on a boy from a small town with no connections and little money. Each rejection felt like a blow, but Eli kept going. He knew he had to try, no matter how many doors closed in his face. Sarah watched her son tirelessly chase his dream, her heart swelling with pride. Even though the town still mocked Eli, and people doubted his potential, Sarah saw the fire in his eyes. It reminded her of the same spark he'd had as a little boy, watching planes take off at the airfield for the first time. She believed in him, just as Mr. Lewis had, and that gave Eli the strength to push through the doubt. Months passed, and Eli started to lose hope. After so many rejections, it was hard to imagine anyone would ever give him a chance. But then, one afternoon, a letter arrived that would change everything. Eli stood in the kitchen, holding the envelope with trembling hands. "Congratulations, you have been awarded a full scholarship to our flight school program." Eli couldn't believe it. His heart raced as he read the letter again, making sure he hadn't misunderstood. He had done it. After all the hard work, after all the rejection, someone had finally taken a chance on him. He was going to flight school. The day he left for the city was bittersweet. Sarah hugged him tightly at the bus station, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so proud of you, Eli," she whispered. "You've worked so hard for this. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt yourself again." Eli hugged her back, his heart pounding with excitement and nerves. "I won't, Mom. I promise." As the bus pulled away, Eli looked out the window at the small town he had known his whole life. He knew leaving was the right choice, but a part of him worried about what lay ahead. The city was big, and flight school would be challenging. But for the first time, he felt like his dream was within reach. At the flight school, Eli was thrown into a whole new world. The competition was fierce, and many of the other students came from wealthy families with long aviation legacies. Eli felt out of place at first, but he was determined to prove he belonged there. He worked harder than ever before, spending long nights studying aerodynamics, weather patterns, and navigation. Every day in the cockpit was a step closer to his goal. The pressure was intense, and there were moments when Eli wondered if he could keep up. But he pushed through the challenges, remembering all he had overcome just to get this far. With each lesson, Eli's skills improved. His instructors noticed his dedication and passion, and slowly Eli began to earn the respect of his peers. As the weeks turned into months, Eli's hard work started to pay off. He passed his exams with flying colors and began logging more hours in the air. Each flight felt like a victory, bringing him one step closer to his dream. He could finally see the path to earning his pilot's license, and for the first time in his life, the sky didn't seem so far away. Eli's journey was far from over, but now he had something he had always dreamed of, a real chance. As he looked out at the endless blue sky during one of his solo flights, he couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. If Eli's inspiring journey moved you, imagine the stories yet to come. Don't miss out on more heartwarming tales of perseverance, dreams, and triumphs. Subscribe now to stay updated on stories that uplift, motivate, and remind you that anything is possible with determination and heart.